Well, welcome back for a very special episode of Campfire Conversations as we are once again virtually gathered around the campfire. I'm Pastor Ryan Tonetti, along with, as always, my co-host Chip May. Hi, Chip.
It is a pleasure to be here, Ryan. We've got a bunch of guests this afternoon. We've got Brian McKenna, who works in the mental health field. He has been our senior counselor for our Omega Teen Retreat for, what is it now, Brian, 150 years? Is that what it is now?
Yeah, close to that. Probably about 27 years or so. So I'm excited to be part of this today, and thanks for having me.
All right, Brian's calling in from Chicago. We also have Kristen Hardy, who is from the Detroit area. She also works in the mental health field, and she's been our senior counselor for our Alpha Teen Retreat for a much shorter time, but still, what, about 7 or 8 years, I think it has been?
At Alpha Week? No, only 2, Chip.
Okay, it felt longer.
Seems like longer, yes.
So thanks for joining us, Kristen. We're also joined with Reverend Bill Yonker, also from the suburbs of Chicago, and he has been the dean, the speaker for our Omega Teen Retreat for 30 years.
30. This is my 32nd.
32nd year. So, and also joining us all the way from Texas is Pastor Travis Harchin, who has been our dean and speaker for our Alpha Teen Retreat for 75 years.
Close, very, very close. I'm hoping to get half as far as Bill is with the Omega Week. So
you can see I did a lot of research on that.
Numbers are not his strong suit.
Yeah, exactly. So, but anyways, it's exciting to have all of you here.
Yeah, and we want to especially talk today about some of the spiritual and mental health issues that are raised by this coronavirus pandemic. Maybe with a special attention paid to teens and young people, but we can also zoom out from there a little bit just to look at the culture at large and for all of us, because really there's no one who is accepted from this. We're all impacted by this in our own ways. And Brian, I wanted to start with you, with just asking, as this pandemic has started to spread, one of the things that has spread kind of right in its train are mental health issues. And why is that? Why is it that this is triggering mental health issues in young people, but really in people of all ages?
Yeah, I think what's going on is there's really a mindset switch from living to surviving.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this triggers a lot of feelings of hopelessness, and things that go along with that as well is decreased job security, right? And this whole, it's promoting social withdrawal, right? And so you have that loneliness that comes with that, that leads to other things like depression and anxiety. And so there's just a general sense of fear, right? Fear for loved ones. It may not maybe directly impact us, or we don't see it yet impacting us, but we have that fear, whether it's a grandparent, right? Or somebody who may have a compromised autoimmune system, or just a fear of like, maybe you're healthy and you catch this yourself as well. So what I'm seeing is a lot of increase of health anxiety, right? Like, how am I doing? And then automatically fearing like, okay, do I have the coronavirus, right? Have I caught this piece of it as well? And so what I'm finding is the shelter down, the quarantine makes it more difficult to distract oneself from existing mental health issues. And so I think that really becomes the key, is like, how do we live a life in a house that you can't get out from under, right? Yes, you can go outside for a walk, but we're just socially isolated. And God made us to be in connection and in community with one another. And so we get creative, right, in terms of what we're doing here today and video conferencing, and there's ways with technology that can be used to our advantage. But we also just have to make sure that we take this time, which now is kind of slowed down in some ways, to be able to reconnect. It's all about that connection piece and connecting on a family member level, especially those that are in your house, and then also reaching out to those that may feel more isolated.
You said something interesting there that, I mean, is it fair to say that in some respects, what this has brought about is not just creating new mental health issues, but that it's unmasking underlying things. So things that were already there, but that we maybe have been able to, tamp down because we keep ourselves distracted, because we keep ourselves busy. So that in a sense, it's really just kind of pulling back the covers a little bit on stuff that was already there. Is that fair to say, Brian?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what's going on. And a lot of this is maybe buried inside of us. And then when you're in a stressful situation like this, you have all of your emotions come out, right? And so positive ones and negative ones, especially in this situation. And what I've found through the counseling that I do with a lot of people is you can't really block one emotion. It's just not possible to say, okay, I'm going to block sadness. Because if you block one emotion, you block them all. And the problem with blocking them all, it really leads to numbness. And if you get to the point where you're numb to all feelings, you really get to a bad spot, which leads to things like despair and deeper levels of anxiety and depression and things like that as well. And so what I teach people is you still have to sit with that uncomfortable feeling. You have to sit with with the anxiety, right? The more you try to fight it or to put it off, and the more then it just gets a grasp and a grip on you as well. So learning how to deal with this state and kind of where we're at, it's surreal, right? And so in a lot of ways, which is so foreign to us to be able to live in this place where you can't go outside your home and you can't connect, or you're in situations where then you're unable to do your job, right? In a lot of ways. So absolutely, you're right.
I think the Pixar movie Inside Out that came out a couple of years ago did such a good job of showing the weaknesses, the limitations of what you're saying, of trying to just numb yourself to any emotions, and it ultimately proves ineffective and unhelpful in the long run. Even if it's hard in the moment to be feeling things like sadness and loneliness and so forth, you've got to ride with it a little bit.
So, Kristen, you obviously made it outside as you're at the beach there with the palm tree behind you. I am outside. So what are you seeing with your clients in your practice?
Yeah, very much want to echo what Brian's been saying. I just think there's so much uncertainty and not a lot of answers, especially for kids. And the teens that I'm working with, just feeding off of their parents. And it's funny how as adults, we're kind of struggling with this anxiety too that goes along with that. And I think sometimes that comes out in the way that we are communicating and talking with our kids as well. And so I think that's something, especially I've been trying to work really hard with, is still setting a good mood for the day and realizing this is not ideal. But how can we make it fun? And how can we sort of stay in a routine and do things that are keeping us focused ahead, as opposed to getting so wrapped up and consumed with the thought of everything that's going on outside of our four walls.
Mm-hmm. I got a question for you pastors here before we go any further, and just want you guys to kind of debunk the myth that could come up where folks think, well, if you're a Christian, you shouldn't be dealing with these sorts of issues. That Christians, we don't struggle with depression and so forth because we are we're optimistic, hopeful people. We have a positive outlook. But Pastor Yonker, can you just say a little bit about that? I mean, is this something that Christians also can be struggling with?
Absolutely. And in fact, I think Christians sometimes fall into exactly what Brian was cautioning us not to do, and that's to just shut down the emotions, or simply say, hey, if I'm really a believer, faith is going to override all these other emotions, and we don't deal with them. And if a bomb is about to explode and it's contained, it's still or it's about to let go, but it's all encapsulated, it'll still implode and do damage on the inside, even if it's not able to get on the outside. So I think sometimes we over spiritualize, if I can use that word, our emotions. We put on a happy Jesus face. We pretend that if we just buck up enough, then all things will be okay, instead of trying to come to grips with what's really going on. And that's why I'm a firm advocate of making sure that we have people that have the skills like a Brian and a Kristen, that it's not just, I walk up, make the sign of the cross on the forehead, slap them on the forehead and say, go be well, because we know that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Travis, and your thoughts too.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. And I think, looking to scripture, you see throughout the Psalms, the reality that here you have very real men in very real life situations, whether being haunted or being followed or being pursued by an enemy. And they don't pretend like everything's okay. They're honest with it. But in the midst of that honesty, they have this hope that God is good and God's will would be done and God will deliver. And you even see that as we're coming into Holy Week, with Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he is facing this overwhelming moment of history where the sins of the world are poured on him. And he just doesn't slap on a face and say, hey guys, let's have a dinner together. He goes and journeys with his friends to the garden. He's brutally honest with his heavenly Father, saying, God, if there's any way this can pass by me, please make it happen. But not my will, your will be done. And so I think that's the encouragement and the gift that we have with our relationship with Jesus, is an invitation to be as honest as we possibly can be with where we are emotionally, spiritually, physically with him, because he loves us and he rejoices in hearing that.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So you alluded there, Travis, to the Psalms as being a source of great comfort and encouragement in the midst of these things. Are there other resources, spiritual or otherwise, that you guys would recommend for those who are struggling with these things? Well, as you're dealing with it, reading the Psalms can be very therapeutic and curative, to recognize that, as you say, other people have been wrestling with this and God can take it. He's happy to hear those prayers from us. What are other resources that you personally have turned to, or you recommend that others turn to, whether it be, spiritual, theological type things, or, just more generically that you find to be helpful? I don't know, Brian, maybe we circle back to you first of all.
Yeah, one of the things I've been teaching a lot lately is the concept or the framework of 3 buckets of acceptance.
Okay.
And what I talk about with these buckets are 3 things. One is everything that's inside of my control, right? That's bucket number 1. And within that bucket, I have to figure out, okay, what can I do about something, right? Bucket number 2 is everything outside of my control. And those are things there's nothing I can do about and just have to give up. And bucket number 3 is the bucket of influence. So when I look at this, bucket number 2, everything that's outside of my control, that bucket right now has become quite large, in our society. And so the whole idea of like, what are things that I just need to let go, and I can list off some of those. Like, I can't control how well people social distance from me, right? And sometimes they may get in too close within that 6 feet, right? I can't control the actions of other people. I don't know how long this is going to last. Like, that's outside of my control. Or predicting what's going to happen. I know some people like to make predictions, and that's all they are right now. We don't know exactly how long this is going to last or what it's going to take, and how other people are going to react. And most importantly, I can't control how much toilet paper is going to be at the store when I show up there, right? And so when I first heard that, it was one of those where it's like, okay, is there something related to bowel distress here, and that everybody's running out because of the coronavirus? And it's not.
You can control how much you use, though. You can control that.
You can control how much, which I've done in my household. I put an ultimatum down in terms
there you
of
go.
back. No more double ply. And so that fact of like, okay, these things are all outside of my control. But then there's a whole bunch of things that you can look at are what are inside of your control. And so when I think about those, that's where you should be focusing, right? So focusing what's inside of your control. And when I think about that is I can control my attitude, right? My outlook. Is it going to be negative? Is it going to be positive? I can control if I'm going to follow the CDC guidelines and recommendations, right? Myself, I can control that piece of it. I can control my own social distancing. I can also control how much I'm going to listen to the news and social media. And one of the things that I keep urging people to do is to limit that. I don't want you to ignore it, but at the same time, you know, if you're spending hours listening to that, or even having it on as background noise, it really impacts you. So I tell the people that I counsel is once or twice a day that you're checking for like 5-10 minutes, maybe morning, maybe evening, and not too close to bed. But the fact of like, it really has an impact on you. And so you need to do other things. Another thing that you can control is, you know, doing fun and productive things at home, right? To use this time that in some ways I described as slowing down. And so being able to use that time in that way. Now, the third bucket, the bucket of influence, is kind of a combination of both of these two. It requires some wisdom, but it's all about relationships and looking at that of like influence, right? How are you under the influence? Like, who is influencing you? And vice versa, who are you influencing? And how are you doing that? And one of the things that I think we need to do is focus on, you know, kindness and grace and those things, right? Those are things that you can influence. You can also look at influencing yourself just in terms of how your self-care is. And at some point, maybe if we have time today, I'll talk about some more self-care techniques. But that 3 buckets of acceptance has I found useful for working with people, focusing on things that you can control and not, because what happens is many times people are in the wrong bucket,
Yeah.
right? And so they're focusing on things that they really can't control and wasting some energy in that way as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I was the other day reading an article and then kept going some threads, and by the end, I'm like, am I a microbiologist? Am I, through this thread, going to figure out the antiviral medication? I don't think so, Chip. So, you know, I'm like looking at formulas at some point. I'm like, I'm not sure this is really helpful. But are there experiences that you've had where you've, you know, Brian or Bill or Travis or Kristen, where you've seen people display kindness, empathy, grace during these tough times? Like in Texas, for instance, is anyone, are you guys just barbecuing the entire time? Which would be, for me, like the best thing ever. But
Yeah. That's kindness in itself. But yeah, what do you think, Travis?
Yeah, we've so being the pastor of a church plant, we have a small community that we need to connect with on a regular basis, and so we've been doing Zoom meetings almost every day just to update each other on the coronavirus, where we're at, who we need to care for, and stuff like that. And some of the fun things that we've seen families do is neighborhoods are doing like these collective scavenger hunts, where on certain days you put up certain items on your windows, and then the kids, while they're outside on their PE time, so to speak, they're able to walk around and collect them or log them or count them up. We've seen a lot of members, particularly through Facebook, you know, hey, we're running low on toilet paper. Who has a chance to go get me some? Or does anyone have any extra? And they're able to help out in that way. And so there's been a lot of generosity. I know in our neighborhood, we've seen more people outside walking, more kids outside playing on bikes, more kids outside playing basketball than we have ever seen. I think there's a lot of anxiety and fear there for sure, but I think God is really clearing our calendars of everything. There's no distractions out there, and I think he's allowing us an opportunity to have some spiritual, some family, and some relational resets that are kind of exciting to see unfold in healthy situations. Unhealthy situations, like you said, that the masks, the distractions are gone, and it can be really tough really quick. So we pray for them for sure.
Kristen, what do you
One
think?
area that's been really cool is so nursing homes can't have visitors or very limited visitors anymore. And so friends and families of mine have decided to create cards and then drop them off at the nursing home so that those are getting passed out throughout the nursing home. So they're still getting that connection from the outside world that they can't have right now from their family. So that's been really cool to be able to see that and to be a part of that.
I've been thinking I could volunteer to help teach older people how to use Zoom, you know, but I'm not sure I have it in me. I don't know. It's tough, but
Well, I saw something interesting yesterday. I was out for a walk. I'm trying to be healthy and using this time to do that. And a friend came over, so we went for a walk. And there was a guy in a wheelchair in his driveway. And every car that went by, he waved at. And as we were walking by, he called out hello. And So we said hello, and so we were keeping our social distance, right? But I asked how he was doing, and he said he was good, but he was tired. He said, "Been out here waving at people all day long." I said, "You're just out here waving?" He goes, "Yeah." He says, "As people are driving by, I'm not sure they get much communication or interaction. So I just wanted them to know that I was going to wave to them and let them know there's another human being out here that wanted to say hello." And he said, "You'd be surprised. A couple of cars have even stopped. They thought I was waving like I needed help or something. If I needed help, and I was just trying to help them." And it was just kind of a cool interaction. And I said, "Boy, if I could, I'd shake his hand." And he said, "Well, we'd have to do that another time." So I'm definitely going to stop back when all of this craziness is done, just to walk up, ring his bell, have him come to the door in his wheelchair, and shake his hand.
Hmm. That's a wonderful story, and it's neat to hear. We don't want to in any way underrate what a catastrophe this entire thing is, and how many lives are being negatively affected by it. But it sounds like you guys are already seeing some glimmers of some positives that might emerge out of this. Travis, you mentioned about possible resets for our family lives and even our relationships with the Lord, and just more people getting outside, recovering some of these just basic human things. Are there other glimmers of hope and positives that you guys are seeing that you think maybe this is something that while this is certainly not the way that we wanted to get to it or the way that we wanted to learn this lesson, but these are some positives that could be emerging out of the midst of this crisis. So, Kristen, what have you been thinking about?
Yeah, I just feel like it's almost like God hit the pause button on life. And what I think I personally have really started to gain from this is how overscheduled sometimes and way too busy that we are. And so I think a positive just for us is we've kind of lost track of routine, and we've lost track of really some things that are super important to us. And we just, because of life, don't have time to do it. And so to be able to sit back and sort of, like you said, hit the reset button and say, okay, what is important for us to get done today? But it's also been great to play games together. And because of sports and everything going on at night, we're running 16 different directions and just don't have that time. And so for us, it's been so great to be able to just spend time together, and I'm so thankful for communication via, all these newfangled devices and apps and things that even just be able to communicate still has been such a blessing, but just in a different way. So I'm thankful for learning new things and being challenged in that way.
It's sort of funny, and I'm guilty of it too, of kind of critiquing the younger generation for being on their cell phones too much and texting and all that kind of stuff. And now you're like, okay, you might be the best prepared for this. I feel like who's most if this lasts a longer period of time, who's going to survive this? It's going to be the kids who knew how to already connect via these technologies. So, but it is, I can't imagine, we were talking as a family back in 1918 with the Spanish flu, and they didn't have Zoom, all right, and there was no social media, there was no social network, and there was no safety net either. And so thankfully we're in a time where there are things that can help us during this time.
Mm-hmm. Any of the rest of you positive things that you're seeing or hoping might emerge out of the midst of this? Yeah, Pastor Yonker.
Yeah, I have two grown children that are sheltering in place with us right now, and
is that what they call it now? Okay, I thought.
It's interesting that the initials of that is SIP, and so we enjoy some of God's creations and libations in the evening while shelter in place. But after the last couple of nights, we'll eat dinner and then immediately clear the dinner plates. And we're playing this game called Bananagrams, which my wife is phenomenal at, and she taunts us. But we're playing cards. And I got to tell you, I can't remember the last time I sat with my kids since they've been out of the house and now back home, that we've had so much fun just being together. So that has been tremendous for me. I got to tell you, it's been rejuvenating. I find myself not wanting to tuck away into the TV or into a book because I read a lot. But I want to be with my family. I want to see what's going on. And we're not getting any new news. All the news that we get, we all hear at the same time. So we're not like, it's not just information sharing, it's being together, enjoying each other's company, enjoying each other's personalities. And so
Hmm. That's great. Brian, I wanted to come back to you. You had talked about the need for good self-care in the midst of this. Can you say a little bit more about what are some good practices for us going forward?
Yeah, self-care has always been important, but we really many times have not put enough time into it, right? With our busy schedules and such. But now as we talk about how things have slowed down, I knew things were serious when the NBA canceled their schedule, right? It kind of hit me like, wait a second, I'm a big sports fan, and it's kind of like, wait, isn't that one of the essential jobs out there? And no, it's not, right? And so my kids' sports, all the rest of it is gone, right? So they don't have to run out to different things or different places, and it's important to have a schedule, right? So I'm telling my kids, you have to do something around the house, and we're writing out our schedule, because otherwise you can easily sleep in later, and you can easily let the day slip away and things like that. We're doing parts of the day where there's media fasting and phone fasting, where you know, put your phone away, turn it off, or out of your reach, type of thing. But when it comes to self-care, I use the acronym SLEEP, and it starts off like this. And so S is for sleep. And the question is, are you getting the right amount of sleep? And you could be getting too much sleep, and you may be getting too little. And that's a good indication of where your mental health might be going, right? What's going on beyond that? Could be physical health, could be mental health, but why aren't you getting the right amount of sleep? Well, it might be because of the fears and anxieties and things contributed to that. But that's the first element of self-care. The second one is love. And we already kind of talked about that, is what are ways that you can spread kindness? What are ways that you can have grace? You could get real irritable, real quickly here with the underlying stress that's going on, and you could react in ways that aren't the best, right? In relating to family members. And so, how can we do that, or how can we outreach to others as well? So loving self and loving others and loving our God. The E stands for eat. Yeah, and so making sure that you're eating healthy and nutritiously, and making sure that you're taking this time while we can make meals, right? And so the
Does that
restaurant.
include barbecue or no?
Oh yeah, definitely. If in Texas, barbecue, but we're up here as well. Especially today, we're close to 55 degrees. We'll be barbecuing out back as well here.
Yeah.
So absolutely, you can take time to cook home meals, right? Which a lot of times we haven't had, or you have family time together, have a meal together, right? In terms of that piece as well. The other E stands for exercise,
Mm.
and just making sure that you're getting up, at the very least moving, right? And so getting up and stretching and walking, and if getting creative in how you exercise, especially if you had a gym membership where you're now able to access that. But there's all different ways that you can do this as well. And then lastly, the P stands for praying, right?
Mm.
And so making sure that we're taking time to do this as well, and this slowing down period and the uncertainties and fears has a tendency to allow people to do a little bit more praying. So I use that acronym as SLEEP, for sleep, love, eat, exercise, and pray.
That's excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Brian. Maybe on a little bit of a even more lighthearted note, I've been thinking about how helpful Stevie Wonder is for me getting through this. Just listening to Stevie Wonder is just restorative for me. Are there other like simple or silly things that you guys have been doing or enjoying, that stuff that maybe you wouldn't normally do this? You wouldn't normally eat breakfast for dinner or something like that. But this kind of thing can just be helpful and keep morale up around the house. Do you guys have anything like that?
So we've been doing, sorry, oh, Bill, there you go, move, there you go. All right, Bill, Travis switched places, like that, it's good. We've been doing like devotions, and sometimes at breakfast, sometimes it's at lunch, sometimes it's at dinner. And, like most families, it's usually a train wreck, right? Kids are antsy, screaming, you end up like, shut up, like, I wasn't quite ready the message we were going for here. But at lunch today, I was reading from the Jesus Storybook Bible, and then we read this about Jesus being tempted in the desert, and then we were reading it out of the Bible, and I'm like, okay, so who was it that Jesus was talking to? And my son Charlie who's 80, goes, I'm like, First he was like, a snake. I'm like, not a snake. He's like, I know, a desert hobo. I'm like, all right. That's not a canonical way to describe Satan, but it's pretty good. Desert hobo. So we had a great laugh, and so I think it's been fun as a family. Like my kids are taking it quite well, I think, actually. I mean, the homeschooling isn't that great, but our public schools have not actually gotten a lot of information out to them, but they're in good spirits, and they're been kind of goofy. So I'm seeing our family kind of laughing in ways we haven't as much in the past. So Travis, now that you're right below me, could you
Yeah, so we started it last week where every day I kind of put out a brain teaser for the family, and then I'll post it online and invite people to kind of figure it out throughout the day or share with me other ideas. And that's actually been really, really intriguing, because first I find out all the kids that cheat in my house, because I find in their Google history them looking for the answers. And so they're like, I found the answer. It's like, you cheated is what you did. Anyways, it's been a lot of fun for us because it engages the brain in a different way. It's communal. It's kind of fun for them to see how people are engaging with it across the internet. And it's been a blast.
That's a fun idea.
Yeah, I cannot figure out the quarters one, the arrow.
Me either.
So
anybody else? What are some fun or silly things that help to just keep morale high in your house? Kristen?
Well, I've got a house full of men, and so oftentimes the Nerf guns come out at some point during the day. So thankfully I just loaded up with some arsenal, so we are good to go for a while. But we do have a lot of fun just shooting each other, and that seems to be kind of a nice stress relief throughout the day.
Great. That's nice.
yes.
How about you, Pastor Yonker?
In my house, what we've been doing is doing a lot of dancing and exercise. Well, they're doing a lot of exercising. I'm watching them.
There's nothing better than watching people exercise. It's
Kind of creepy though. Kind of creepy though. I'm just saying.
I'm working the crossword while they're exercising, and then I throw questions at them that they can help me with. But we like to dance, and the dancing's been fun. It certainly is.
Do you do the Yonker dance? Do you do that?
New moves.
Oh.
Yeah. When you get this going in one direction, you got to make sure that everything's off the counters and I don't break.
We want a TikTok. I want a TikTok dance of you. Put one out.
Okay. That would assume I know what TikTok dancing is.
Abby does.
Oh. I really appreciate just the good humor that you guys all have. And I mean, I think it's something for all of us to be prayerful about, making sure that we're getting proper sleep and pondering these things, and just trying, as Brian said earlier, one of the things we can control is just what's our outlook on this? Are we going to continue to have a mindset, hopeful mindset, looking to the Lord? And in the midst of this, it doesn't mean we have to pretend that it doesn't stink in a lot of ways, but still being able to recognize the blessings, the little blessings that we're receiving each and every day. I mean, the graces are there all the time, and so having that kind of outlook on it. Chip, did you have anything else?
Yeah, we'll just go around quickly. Our last question always is, what are you reading? What are you listening to? What are things that are influencing you right now? So some resources for folks on anything. It could be fiction, nonfiction, favorite podcasts, so I know Bill, aka Harry Potter, over there with the glasses. What are you reading, Bill? Okay, wrong. There you go.
There, wrong button. Sorry. So a few years ago, Rob Bell got himself in a lot of trouble, and he came out with a book this year. And I needed just to see kind of where his head was at, because I loved a lot of the stuff he did with Old Testament and Hebrew. And so it's called What Does the Bible Say? And it is a phenomenal read of at his looks at some of the Bible stories. And now I hesitate to say that because somebody's going to say, he's a heretic, he's a heretic. Certainly he came to some conclusions that I do not share. However, even Paul quoted pagan poets in the scripture. So we can look at people we disagree with, but he's got some phenomenal understandings of some of the Bible stories, some new takes that I hadn't thought of that are not only readable, but also preachable. So what do you say, Rob Bell?
Oh.
Who's up next?
For me, there's two resources that I've been really tagging into. One is a podcast called Another Kingdom. It's an allegory. It's a multi-season story that has a lot of like C.S. Lewis, almost J.R. Tolkien kind of allusions to spiritual faith and salvation and grace and this kingdom mindset that we have because of Christ. And it's been fabulous to listen to, and it's been really good. The other thing is there's a new series out called The Chosen, and it's basically based on the biblical stories, but it breathes, for me, life into these characters that I've known for so many years, and kind of presents them in a little bit different way. And it is just really kind of like what Max Lucado did for me when I was in junior high and high school, bringing these two-dimensional characters of scripture into a third dimension. And it's been fantastic to watch for my family and I. So check it out. It's an app. You can't find it on Netflix or anything. It's called The Chosen. And I think it's well worth your time.
What was the first podcast you talked about called?
Another Kingdom.
So the Chosen is not on Netflix. It's on just online.
So what you need to do is either on your Android phone or on your iPhone, go into the App Store and look for The Chosen. They purposely didn't release it through your typical streaming services because they want to control the content. And they felt like it was valuable enough that they didn't want to compromise on the story they believed they had to tell. And so they set it up themselves.
Cool.
Kristen, what are you reading, listening to?
Well, thanks to homeschooling, I've read books like How to Steal a Dog and things I really have no desire to read. But one I am reading is Max Lucado's Anxious for Nothing. Speaking of anxiety, I just think it really is it's an amazing book that just talks a lot about how to deal with anxiety. And so really appropriate for today.
Cool, thank you. Brian?
Yeah, I'm reading a book by Brad Reedy, and the book just came out in January. It's called The Audacity to Be You. And then the subtitle is Learning to Love Your Horrible, Rotten Self. Love the title, and it's the whole idea of really more for parents. And so the whole idea, sometimes we're trying to fix our kids and find the right technique or tool. In a lot of ways of how you parent is more about yourself and looking at that. So he also has a podcast. He's putting stuff out on a weekly basis. Brad Reedy, it's through Evoke, is a podcast that you can download as well. It has a lot of good parenting resource.
Did he rip off Judith Weihorst, Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Really Bad Day?
Sounds like it, huh? Good title.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys all for joining us. We really appreciate it. Thanks for being at the campfire.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll see ya.
Thank you, guys. God bless.